There was a 5-gallon plastic bucket sitting at a yard sale in Ohio last fall. It was filled to the brim with rainwater, dead leaves, and rusted metal.
It smelled like damp earth and old motor oil. The guy running the sale was selling the whole bucket as scrap iron for $10. I reached my hand into the muddy water, pulled out a heavy, rust-caked hand plane, and handed the man a $10 bill. He laughed and told me not to break my back carrying it to my truck. 2 weeks later, after carefully cleaning just the maker's mark and leaving the beautiful dark patina intact, that single rusted block of iron sold to a collector in New York for $1,200. $1,200 out of a scrap bucket.
My name is Arthur. I've spent 35 years crawling through collapsing dairy barns, dusty garages, and estate sales across the Midwest.
Today, we are counting down 5 old, rusty tools sitting in toolboxes right now that most people throw away. I will show you how to spot the difference between cheap scrap metal and heavy, high-carbon American steel that carries real money. Drop a comment below and tell me what state or country you're watching from. I read every single one, and stay with me to number 1, because it's a tool that looks exactly like a cheap toy for a child, but it is actually the holy grail of hand tools. Let's start at number 5, the old wooden-handled handsaw. Most folks see a rusty blade, a chipped wooden handle covered in old paint splatters, and they toss it in the trash. A standard old saw from the 1960s is worth about $5. But if it's an early Disston saw, the money isn't in the rusty steel blade, it's in the handle. Number 4. The Winchester monkey wrench. Everyone knows the name Winchester. They are famous for making rifles that won the West. But after World War I ended, the military contracts dried up. Winchester had massive factories and thousands of workers with nothing to do. So, in the 1920s, they started making everyday items, including hand tools, and modern collectors go absolutely crazy for them. If you find a heavy, rusted adjustable wrench or a hammer in your grandfather's garage, don't throw it in the scrap pile. Get an oily rag and gently wipe the grease off the handle or the flat side of the metal head. If you can read the classic Winchester logo stamped directly into the steel, the price immediately skyrockets. A regular rusty vintage wrench is a $2 yard sale item. A rusty wrench with the Winchester stamp will easily bring $50 to $150. And if you happen to find one of their broad axes or hatchets, those can climb into the high hundreds. Number 3. Vintage snap-on ratchets. Any mechanic will tell you that modern snap-on tools require taking out a second mortgage to afford. But the early stuff, that is museum-quality steel. In the 1920s and 30s, when the company was just starting out in Wisconsin, they stamped their tools differently than they do today. Don't look at the rust, look at the logo. If the words snap-on have a dash between them, and the letters are perfectly straight instead of the modern italicized font, you have a pre-World War II tool. People throw these in the junk drawer because the ratcheting gear inside is stiff, locked up by decades of hardened grease and dirt. They think it's broken. It's not. The internal gears on these old ratchets are practically bulletproof. A good soak in penetrating oil brings them right back to life. An early 1920s snap-on ratchet with the straight logo can easily sell for $200 to $400 to the right tool collector. Number 2. The Peter Wright anvil. Sometimes you find these propping open a heavy barn door or sitting in a garden surrounded by flowers. To most people, a rusty anvil is just a massive piece of dead weight. But traditional blacksmithing is making a massive comeback, and good, high-rebound iron is becoming incredibly scarce. The feature you are looking for is stamped directly on the side of the anvil. Look for the words Peter Wright or solid wrought. Below that, you will see 3 numbers separated by dots. Those numbers are the old English hundredweight system, which tells you exactly how much it weighed when it left the factory in England. If the anvil rings like a church bell when you tap it lightly with a hammer, and the edges of the flat face aren't completely smashed off, that piece of rusty iron is worth a fortune. Even a smaller 100-pound Peter Wright anvil consistently sells for $400 to $700, rust and all. Now, number 1. The Stanley No. 1 hand plane. Stanley made millions of hand planes for smoothing and flattening wood. The standard sizes, like the No. 4 or No. 5, are in almost every grandfather's garage in America. They are common $20 tools, but the No. 1 is different. It is remarkably tiny. It's only about 5.5 inches long. It looks exactly like a toy. Because it was so small, people assume it's a cheap gimmick or a child's toy, and they toss it in the bargain bin at estate sales. But back in the day, nobody bought them because they were too small for heavy lumber work. Because they didn't sell well, Stanley stopped making them. That created the ultimate storm for collectors: extreme rarity. If you find a tiny hand plane, wipe the dust off the front toe of the cast iron body. If you see a No. 1 cast into the metal, do not drop it. Treat it like glass. Even covered in heavy rust, with a cracked wooden handle, a Stanley No. 1 is a $1,000 to $1,500 tool. If it's in beautiful, clean condition, it can easily cross $2,500 at a tool auction. Before you run out to the garage, here is the most important rule of old tools. Do not take an angle grinder, a wire wheel, or harsh chemicals to them. I have watched guys take a wire brush to a $1,000 antique plane to make it shiny, and they turned it into a $50 paperweight in 10 minutes. Grinding destroys the historical patina and erases the maker's marks. If you don't know what you have, leave the rust exactly where it is. Value hides under the dirt. Check your toolboxes, check your basement, and check the rusted bucket in the corner of the garage.
Then come back and tell me in the comments what you found. Your find might just be the one I feature next week. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next hunt.